Our last video discussed the famed question, who is God? In this video, I endeavor to answer, what is God? The doctrine of divine simplicity holds that God is not composed of parts or attributes. God is simply God, and there is nothing more to say. This doctrine is based on the belief that God is perfect, and that perfection cannot be composed of parts. As St. Thomas Aquinas said, God is ipsum esse subsistens, the sheer act of being itself. There is nothing external to God. You can't be logically or temporally before God, because he just is. Logic and time are internal to him. As I discussed in my video, CTMU Theology, Who is God? There is no need to stick with childish conceptions of God, that God is a being that the eye can perceive, or that God is an old man in the sky, as some have satirized. The incorporeality of God is a demonstrative truth and an indispensable element of our faith. God does not exist in the same way as things we can see and touch and quantify, because God is the infinite source of everything. There is nothing against which he can be compared by definition. There are no parts of God, only aspects. Existence and being are applied homonymously to God instead of created beings. God does not exist as a table exists. He would be another being instead of being itself. Any definition of God which does not include the entirety of reality and its unity and sovereignty would fall short in every branch of Abrahamic monotheism for want of absolute creative power and knowledge. The path to knowledge of God is to extend and refine your definition of God until it is tautologically true. The mistake of atheists is they set out to find an absurdly defined God and then come back and announce there is no evidence for such a being. In the CTMU, God is super-tautological, meaning he embodies the structure of absolute truth, which denotes inclusion within reality. Such a being cannot not exist. When we examine the properties of God, we find that it is consistent with the definition of God in all of the major monotheistic religions, such as Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Tautology is how God defines himself in the Bible. Moses had to prove God's existence to idolaters using the name Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am. Ehyeh is derived from the Hebrew verb haya, which means to be. The text repeats the word that denotes existence as an attribute. Asher is an incomplete noun that another noun must complete, so it's a subject of the predicate. The phrase means that the object described and the attribute by which we describe him are the same in God. This structure of God's being is called analytic reality closure by Chris Langan, and expresses the idea that reality is intension, a term in logic to denote the set of properties that define a word or concept, and extension, that to which the definition refers, are the same. The ARC is the first and most fundamental principle of the CTMU. It means that any predicate ascribed to God is a synonym for the fullness of his being. This is why Langan calls reality int equals reality ext, which is on the thumbnail of this video, standing for intension and extension respectively, the God equation, because the GOD equation for global operator descriptor, which is the definition of God in the CTMU, because God has nothing outside of himself by which to define himself. So all attributes which are rightfully ascribed to him, goodness, power, glory, grandeur, will, and life, are not separate attributes in the sense that there is a plurality in God, but syndiphonic relands of the fullness of his being, which retains every perfection in one simple substance. The great Jewish philosopher Moses Maimonides interprets the phrase Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh as the existing being which is the existing being, affecting total closure. God exists not merely in the ordinary sense of the term, but as the being whose existence is absolute. One cannot rationally deny such a being's existence. Philosophy professor Peter Weigel says, divine simplicity is central to the classical Western concept of God. Maimonides explains, God is one simple substance without any composition or plurality of elements, one from whatever side you view it, not divisible into two parts in any way or by any cause. God acquires aspects through something in the CTMU called syntactic unisect, by participating in and relating to the life of the universe. Syntactic unisect notes that any properties realized within a medium must be properties of the medium itself. God possesses life, consciousness, personality, power, wisdom, and will concerning his creation. Yet, at the other end of the mapping of this mu-morphic grammar, which relates God and his creation, God's power, knowledge, presence, goodness, and all other aspects are identical qualities, not denoting his essence and not anything extraneous to his essence. These are not arbitrary decisions or separate parts of God, nor something hovering over him in some determining way, but instead the expression of the fullness of his being. God is self-defining. There are no previous causes of his existence by which one could define him. Interestingly, God does not need any complexity or multiplicity to hear prayer, communicate with human beings in the language they understand, or have a purpose for our lives, because he is projecting himself into each person in the form of the reality self-simulation in which we exist, meaning God, the identity of reality, is essentially personal. And yet beyond human description and relation, God remains absolutely one and unique, with no properties or attributes besides the fullness of his being. To reiterate, in us, wisdom, power, will, etc. are separate qualities. In God, they are one. All perfections must exist actually in God, not as mere potentiality, as the emanation from one simple substance in which all ideals are compatible. God exists without possessing the attribute of existence. He lives without having the quality of life, knows without containing the feature of knowledge. He's wise without possessing the trait of wisdom, and omnipotent without possessing the attribute of omnipotence. All of this reduces to the same identity, in whom there is no plurality. As Prophet Moses says in the book of Deuteronomy, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Let the light shine forth in the darkness, and may the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you." Like and subscribe. Peace.